Hello again. Hey guys, how's it going? Dudey here. I am back with another video. Today we're delving into the afterlife. More specifically, what people claim to have experienced and seen after passing away, being resuscitated, coming back and telling everyone, telling scientists, telling doctors, telling their friends and family what they experienced on the other side. So recently I sat down and I began watching Surviving Death on Netflix, and it's something that I highly recommend that you check out. It is fantastic. The first episode specifically delves into near-death experiences and it fascinated me, but also changed my perspective on this subject dramatically. I'm talking a 180 reversal. For the longest time, I have believed that once we are gone, unfortunately, that is it. There is nothing afterwards. I kind of took it as, well, we have no comprehension of what happened before we were born, so why would we have any comprehension of after we pass away? However, having seen this episode, having heard these testimonies from these people, like I said, I've done a full 180, and I recommend that you check out Surviving Death to see if it does the same for you. Now, just to set the scene for me personally, I think it's very important to state I've never been a religious person. I am still not a religious person, regardless of the fact that I now believe that there is something more after we die. I don't believe in a higher being or a God. Now that may seem slightly contradictory as I'm about to explain why I believe that there is an afterlife, but once I explain, hopefully you get where I'm coming from. I genuinely believe, some may disagree with me, that the concept of an afterlife can exist without it being necessary that there is a God or a higher being. They don't have to coexist to exist. I also understand fully, initially from a scientific perspective or even a logical perspective, you may think that an afterlife seems ridiculous. But I put to you that there is so much that we do not understand as human beings, so much about the mind that we do not understand as human beings, so much about consciousness itself that we do not understand as human beings. So it's not out of the realms of possibility that our energy, our soul if you like, our consciousness goes on after our physical body perishes. This could be moving on to another plane of existence. This could be moving on to another dimension. Who knows? The first woman that I want to talk about is the lady who is the first person in the Surviving Death episode. Orthopedic surgeon Neal. In 1999, Mary was whitewater rafting in Chile. She ended up accidentally falling down a waterfall, and this is how she explains the entire ordeal. My boat became pinned and I was completely submerged under 10 feet of water. I was not breathing. My torso was absolutely plastered to the front deck of the boat. I could feel my bones breaking. I thought I should be screaming, but I wasn't. I felt no pain, no fear, no panic. I felt more alive than I had ever felt. Could feel my spirit peel away from my body as it was released up to the heavens. I was immediately greeted by a group of somethings. I don't know what to call them. People, spirits, beings. I didn't recognize any of them, but they had been important in my life story somehow, like a grandparent that had died before I was born. They were so overjoyed to welcome me and greet me and love me. These beings started taking me down this pathway. The pathway was very thickly covered with hundreds of thousands of flowers. It was exploding with every color of the universe. Absolute shift of time and dimension. I experienced all of eternity into every second, and every second expanded into all of eternity. The pathway went to this great dome structure. I believe I was in heaven, God's world, whatever you want to call it. I had an overwhelming sense of being home. At the same time, I could look back at the river where my body was still submerged underwater. Now, her body was recovered by the guys that she was kayaking with. Her body was purple, bloated, she had fixed eyes. She was dead. Categorically dead. She had been without oxygen for 30 minutes, and there is no doubt in her professional opinion as an orthopedic spinal surgeon that she was gone. She goes on to claim that from the dome structure, she could see the CPR that was being done to her. She could hear one of the guys pleading with her to come back. But of course, being without oxygen for 30 minutes, statistically, her chances of survival was 0. She goes on to say she had an overwhelming physical sensation of being held and comforted and reassured that everything was fine. She didn't want to come back, but the being said that it wasn't her time yet. She still had things to do, and she was to go back. She came back around to grave injuries, and she was on the side of a river in the middle of Chile, in the middle of nowhere. The guys knew they had to get her to a hospital as quickly as possible if she stood any chance of surviving, and so they put her on a boat and carried her through the forests trying to find a dirt road. They eventually came across a dirt road and miraculously parked on this dirt road in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Chile, was an ambulance. So Mary was rushed to hospital in that ambulance and later went on to make a full recovery. Now, making a full recovery when you've been without oxygen for 30 minutes, not having an ounce of brain damage, is phenomenal, and to be honest, pretty much impossible. Now, of course, Mary, being an orthopedic spinal surgeon, a woman of medicine, science and logic, this changed her outlook massively. And this is something that happens very commonly in these stories. There are many factors that all match up throughout these testimonies, one of which is having the outlook on their lives flipped on its head. In 1892, Albert Heim collected the first series of near-death experiences. He was a geologist in Switzerland. When he climbed the Alps, he fell, and he said he had a beautiful experience, time expanding as his descent increased. This led him to ask other mountain climbers that had fallen in the Alps, and he got 30 other cases like his who fell and had amazing, blissful experiences. A lot of people that pass over claim that they go through a portal or a tunnel of some description, and once they pass through, they are hit with a very warm, welcoming, loving, comforting light. All over the world, people claiming no sense of time, this warm, loving light, inflated, exaggerated senses. They return profoundly changed, no longer fearing death, a new appreciation for life. Difficulties with certain things like materialism, employment, and actually their marriages. Another testimony is from Jose Hernandez. Jose was working on a bucket truck, working on some electrical cables. It all went wrong and he ended up smashing his ribs against the bucket truck. He went to the emergency room. He was given pain medication, and it turned out that he was allergic to the medication, which resulted in his heart stopping. Now, Jose says that there was a tunnel which he fell into. He saw vivid colour wrapped around him, almost merging with him. He heard millions of voices, looked down and saw the ocean. He then noticed a man in the water who was knee deep, and he turns around. It was his father. He and his father had a very troubled relationship. They couldn't even hug. He was so bitter and regretful for never showing his father that he loved him. Jose thought this was his chance to make peace with his father, something he couldn't do in life. They hugged. They said they loved each other. His father looked at him and said, "Jose, you need to go back." Jose, quite understandably, didn't want to, but his father insisted there was more for him to do, and that when his time comes, his father will come back and get him. Jose felt a sense of pull, and he came back to life. This experience changed Jose's life forever. Loved ones collecting you on the other side is a very common testimony, and something else that I think it's in like episode 4 of Surviving Death. It's not directly linked to once you pass over, but there are many testimonies of people on their deathbed that claim to see their deceased loved ones in the room coming to prepare them to pass over. And you've got to think, this isn't like the odd person, this is thousands of people. Now, of course, it would be natural to say, well, these people are on a lot of drugs in these latter stages, in the final moments. But actually, what has been found through research is these drugs tend to actually inhibit these experiences. Some people put it down to a lack of oxygen, but that contradicts decades of scientific research that a lack of oxygen actually causes the opposite of a blissful experience. Just think about, in planes, why they have those oxygen masks. It's because when the plane is plummeting to the ground, you will have an overabundance of oxygen, which will give you a euphoric experience. So Mary, for example, who was drowning at the bottom of a waterfall, would have experienced a lack of oxygen, not an overabundance of oxygen, which would contradict the idea or possibility of a euphoric, blissful experience. There are also brain scans that have been taken, and all signs from these brain scans show a massive expansion in consciousness when we die. I guess the thing for me, after watching this documentary and looking and reading so many testimonies online, is this has happened to thousands and thousands of people across the world, across different continents, different religions, different backgrounds, and there are so many stark similarities throughout. And you could argue, of course, that this is just anecdotal evidence, but all science starts off with anecdotal evidence. This person notices something, this person notices the same thing, this other person notices the same thing. Okay, let's try and correlate all this information, try and test it, etc. Which there are legit scientists trying to correlate all this information and trying to get something concrete as evidence that our consciousness goes elsewhere after we die. And you know what? Strip all the logic and all that bullshit away for a second. It kind of made me realise, as I'm getting older and my loved ones are getting older, and you come to realise that one day they're not going to be here anymore, which, as just a thought process on its own, is harrowing to say the least. It's just nicer and more of a comfort to think that actually their energy, their consciousness will go elsewhere after they are no longer here with us. Not only that, from all these testimonies, they will go somewhere where they feel a warm, loving embrace. They feel happy, there's no fear. There is just, these over-exaggerated, heightened senses of beautiful colour and sound and emotion. I kind of look back to how I used to think, that when we're gone, and that's it. And just how dark that kind of outlook is. And I'm glad, I'm happy that my outlook has shifted and that it's changed, because, hopefully it will help me deal with loss when it inevitably, unfortunately, comes. We all have to deal with it at some point in our lives. Many already have, many are right now, and many will in time. And the thought that they'll go on to a better place, not necessarily heaven with God, it could just be another plane of existence where this mortal shell no longer contains what makes us us, because ultimately we are our consciousness. This is just a meat suit shell body thing that we rock around in for hopefully 80 years. So yeah, it's nice to think that we might go on elsewhere. That's a really, I much prefer that idea than my previous one. I would love to know what you guys think. I don't want you to think like I've come back from my break and I've got all spiritual and lost it. I haven't. I have, had a big sit down with myself and identify my priorities and all that good stuff, and I do identify my friends, family, loved ones, as that priority, as they should be, and they never should have slipped down in my priority lists, because you only get one family, all right, friends, you can chop and change or whatever, but if you love them, let them know, tell them, make sure that they never doubt it. Check out Surviving Death. it's intriguing. Episode 2 and 3 is about mediums. Now we all know my thoughts on mediums. It's tricky. It's tricky, isn't it? But yeah, check out episode 1 of Surviving Death. Yeah, if you enjoy it, do let me know. Do let me know what you think. You know, are you religious? Do you believe that there's a God and stuff? Do you believe in an afterlife? Do you believe our consciousness goes on? Or do you believe that when we're gone, that's it? The book is closed. You had a good run. What do you guys think? I really do want to know. But as for me, that's it for today, I'd say. I'll wrap it up there. I thought I'd come back. I class this as paranormal, guys, because obviously it's about the afterlife and, you know, and being a ghosty or whatever you want to call it. You know, our consciousness might go on to a different plane of existence as a ghost. So, yeah, I'm classing this as paranormal, so it does fit in with the brand here. I've got a new backdrop and stuff. I thought I'd simplify it. I've moved house. I've got a new streaming setup, which is beautiful. I've obviously got the podcast, which is just going from strength to strength, allegedly, possibly, maybe podcast or Atma podcast. The A at the end is Army, by the way, so many people are asking. So go check out the allegedly, possibly, maybe podcast. We've got a website because I have a clothing brand. It's the allegedly, possibly, maybe clothing brand. We have a lot of fun conspiracy clothing on there, so go check that out. It's allegedly, possibly, maybe.co.uk. $12.99 for our shirts, guys. Nice and cheap, but fantastic quality. So yeah, that's it for me, guys. I know I've been away for a bit. I've missed you, and I'm back, and I'm going to be uploading regularly again. I just needed that break. I feel refreshed. I feel ready to go again. And I also stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Dudey Rhino, so check that out as well. Nice one, guys. I really appreciate you. Have a great day, have a great week. I hope 2021 is a good year for you as well. Sweet one, geese.